Final speaker, Suzi Gablik, returns to New York from London, where she now mainly lives. She is a widely exhibited artist, but one where she puts it, finds it increasingly difficult to be an artist in today's world. And she is a critic, the author of a deservedly renowned study of Magritte, of a theoretical work called Progress in Art that I highly recommend to any of you who don't already know it, and of the forthcoming Has Modernism Failed? She is an educator who lectures far and wide throughout the world. She has in her work addressed our question most explicitly. She writes out, and I quote, what nowadays ought to be the burning question, what it means to be an artist in today's world, or what our art is for.
Well, ever since modernism, the question of what is art for is one we simply don't like asking. Modernism went to great lengths to show us that art had no purpose, that it was valuable in and for itself, thus the phrase art for art's sake. The question seems to have a new poignancy, however, now that we may be at a turning point in history as important as the discovery of fire making. Today, we live in a world on the brink of global disaster. The question facing each of us at this point is, how can we live with this awareness without feeling overwhelmed? How can we accelerate our insight and summon our courage to act? How can we overcome our psychic numbing so that we can create a future that will work for us? As the dangers to planetary survival escalate, does art have any part to play in creating new contexts for change? What is the artist's responsibility? Recently, I read the following statement by the German neo-expressionist painter George Baselitz. It was in a catalogue of his work, which included some of his own writing. The artist, he states, is not responsible to anyone. His social role is asocial. His only responsibility consists in an attitude to the work he does. There is no communication with any public whatsoever. The artist can ask no question, and he makes no statement. He offers no information, message, or opinion. It is the end product which counts, in my case, the picture. This seems to be the terminal view of an attitude that began to take hold during the 1950s among the community of artists out of which abstract expressionism emerged. It was then that the totally self-possessed, self-reliant individual became the model for the typical artist's role in the modern world. The gesture of putting paint on canvas became the ultimate gesture of liberation, not only from political and social norms, but from previous art history as well. History, which implies responsibility to the past and a dependence on the achievements of others, was the obstacle to be transcended. A new art was necessary, and according to Barnett Newman, quote, "We actually began from scratch, as if painting were not only dead, but had never existed." Harold Rosenberg wrote at the time about Willem de Kooning that, quote, "He discards all social roles in order to start with himself as he is, and all definitions of art in order to start with art as it might appear through him." At that point, modernism so embraced the notions of freedom and autonomy, of art needing to answer only to its own laws, its own logic, the pure aesthetic without a function, that we now have whole generations of artists who doubt that it was ever meant to be organically integrated with society's needs or purposes in the first place. The marginal role of art in modern society has been nowhere better described than by the painter Bruce Boyce in a lecture I heard last year at the School of Visual Arts. The talk was entitled what it means to be an artist and voice as a resident of group of students. After leaving school, he said, students often don't work because there's no reason to work. Nobody pays attention anymore, so there seems no reason to press on. There's never a reason to do artwork. It just doesn't seem to matter. It all looks all right, but it just doesn't matter. You get bored doing it because you're in a vacuum. There's no motivation, no rules to say what you should do or whether it's good or not. Confidence is the thing that allows you to work eventually. You know you can do this thing and succeed at it. It gets harder all the time, but you get more used to the frustration. If there were rules, it would be simple enough to know what to do. But you find yourself looking for something and you don't know what it is. So how do you ever know when you find it? Needless to say, these comments underline the core weaknesses of the modernist ethos, the retreat into privatism and self-expression, which means that there is no example to follow, no authority to rely on, no discipline to be received. It is almost as if the freer the artist has become, the more impotent he feels himself to be. If we accept as accurate Erich Fromm's description in the same society of which human needs are basic and essential, the need for relatedness, for transcendence, a concept which for Fromm has nothing to do with God, but refers to the need to transcend one's self-centered, narcissistic, alienated position to one of being related to others and open to the world. The need for rootedness and a sense of identity, and for a frame of orientation and an object of devotion, then the achievements of modernism would appear to have been had at too high a cost. It will have renounced too much that is crucial to human well-being, all in the name of freedom and self-sufficiency. The extreme degree of freedom offered by our society places everyone under increased pressure to choose among unlimited alternatives. But with the breakdown of social consensus, it has become harder and harder to know how or what to choose, or how to defend or validate one's choice. The freedom from all determinants leads to an indeterminacy so total that finally one has no reason for choosing anything at all. Individuality and freedom are undoubtedly the greatest achievement of modern culture. But insistence upon absolute freedom for each individual leads to a negative attitude towards society, and the sense of a culture deeply alienated from its surroundings. The desire for an unconditioned world can only be realized when all is said and done at the cost of social art is for. It never functions entirely in terms of self-interest. Today there is a sense that only by divorcing themselves from any social role can artists establish their own individual identity. Freedom and social obligation are experienced in our world as polar opposites which run at cross purposes to each other. That seems in tune with the rest of our cultural trance. Our society expects us to manically overproduce, to overconsume, and to waste. We have come full circle from traditional society where the individual was rarely, if ever, thrown back on himself. Not only are our artists at liberty to make art in any manner they please, they must choose between alternatives whether they like it or not. As the sociologist Peter Berger has pointed out, modern consciousness entails a movement from fate to choice. Choice is a modern idea. There was no choice in traditional societies. But the paradox of freedom, as I've been trying to show, is that it is very difficult for the individual to preserve his identity in a society where traditional institutions and values offer no support. In its quest for autonomy and its belief that art cannot possibly thrive any longer constrained by moral or social demands, modernism discouraged the individual from finding any good outside of himself. Liberation and alienation, however, turn out to be inextricably connected, reverse sides of the same coin. Beyond a certain point, freedom, like technological progress, is counterproductive. It defeats its own ends and becomes alienating. Our relativistic philosophy may seem more appealing, but it has a deeper biologic against it, in that too much freedom has distinctly negative consequences for the emotional economy of the individual. The anguish of choice, which has been written about so eloquently by Erich Fromm, can become a burden and a danger, since everything now depends on the individual's own effort and not on the security of his traditional status. Whatever certainty there is must be dredged up from within the subjective consciousness of the individual. It can no longer be derived from the socially shared external world of meanings and values. In taking away our faith in transcendence and our respect for authority, modernity has made us all fearful about belief in anything. It has also made us isolated and anxious, and denied us the certainty of being part of some larger purpose. We take the absence of superior forces to be liberating, preferring autonomy. But the cost of such freedom has been the loss of security that comes from tradition, and which would normally guarantee for art both moral and practical significance. Indeed, according to Fromm, insecurity is what ultimately breeds the compensatory craving for fame and the compulsory striving for success. Fromm even goes so far as to claim that the character traits engendered by our particular socio-economic system and by our way of living are actually pathogenic. Certainly, modern Western society does seem to be unique in regarding its art as a commodity to be sold in exchange for money, prestige, and power. Aboriginal society, for instance, did not perceive art in terms of its commercial value. No pre-industrial culture ever did. Art was a living thing, a means of coming into contact with the life force of nature, not something external to the artist to be sold at profit. Sacred designs were painted in secret and revealed only in ritual, guarded from women, strangers, and the uninitiated, and often burnt when they had served their purpose. Today, bark painting flourishes only in northern Australia, and under Western influence, the paintings are now made for a market of art dealers who sell them in urban centers, mostly to tourists. In his book, The Gift, Lewis Hyde claims that the way we treat a thing can sometimes change its nature. The idea of making art for profit only appears with the development of foreign trade, when spiritual, moral, and economic life begin to be separated from one another. It is this, according to Hyde, that marks the distinction between a gift-giving society and a market society. Hyde argues that in its fundamental nature, art is a gift and not a commodity. So it is hardly an accident that we call those nations known for their commodities the free world. The phrase doesn't refer to political freedoms. It merely indicates that the dominant form of exchange in these lands does not bind the individual in any way, to his family, to his community, or to the state. For it is only when a part of the self is given away that community appears. This is what the modern individual finds it so hard to do. We are taught to sell ourselves, not to give ourselves away. Commodity systems have their own sort of growth, but they bring neither personal transformation nor the social and spiritual cohesion of gift exchange. We argued, of course, that ever since the Renaissance, a period which saw the transformation of the artist from an anonymous craftsman into an intellectual with special creative powers, artists have always been preoccupied with the pursuit of fame and fortune. Ambition, greed, and self-seeking were not exactly absent from the social structure at that time, a period which saw the rise of desires for recognition and status that were rare or unknown earlier. Vasari's Lives of the Artists, for instance, is full of waggish accounts of professional rivalry, such as the jealousy that Torrigiano, a minor artist, felt towards Michelangelo on seeing him much more honored and talented than himself. Torrigiano began by mocking Michelangelo and at one point hit him on the nose so hard he broke it, for which undignified conduct he got himself banished from Florence. Have things really changed such a great deal since then? I think the answer is that they have. Individualism took a different form in the past, being tempered by social and aesthetic controls and balanced by a more harmonious development of spiritual powers. In the Renaissance, the artist's mission was twofold. A direct one imposed by the requirements of church, city, or patron, and an indirect one arising from the need to express individuality. Although the artist had come to recognize himself as an individual with a free personality, and was no longer satisfied to create anonymously as in the Middle Ages, he was equally conscious of himself as a social being. The 15th century is, above all, the era of the whole man, known for what the Renaissance called virtue, the capacity for showing oneself a man, not the specialist absorbed solely by professional ambitions. Religion provided a source of authority that opposed itself to worldly pursuits. The individual's dependence on God made just as high a claim on him as the world did. The self had not yet acquired its illusion of self-sufficiency. It had not yet come to believe it had all the rights and none of the social obligations. Individual striving was thus kept in balance because it was but one variable in a total system. Late capitalism, by contrast, has maximized this particular variable to such an extent that it seems to have broken the inward harmony of the social organism as a whole, causing it to go runaway and maybe even to destroy itself. The modern artist assumes the freedom to express himself as his natural, established condition, without any special cause for it. Nothing from outside incites this freedom to recognize limits to itself or to refer to any authority higher than itself. Social responsibility, of course, requires the sacrifice of individualism and a surrender to the feeling that one is working for something other than oneself. As a society of professionals, however, we have no objects of dedication except a specialized pursuit. Hannah Arendt speaks of the sad opaqueness of a private life centered on nothing but itself. She claims that whenever true authority existed, it was always joined with responsibility for the course of things in the world. The solitary shaman does not exist simply for his or her own benefit. It is precisely this exalted conception of the artist's mission that gives art its authority, the conception he has of his work, and the moral ideal to which he is committed. Today, Andy Warhol comments, why do people think artists are so special? It's just another job. Like all ideas, the idea of modernism has had a lifespan. Its legacy seems to require that we learn to look at art once again in terms of moral purpose, rather than aesthetic style. That is, if we are ever to succeed in transforming personal vision into social responsibility.